probably the Farm's best known song, All Together Now. How did that song come about?
A song called No Man's Land in the early parts of the Farm's career. That was in the 80s. And it was Steve Grimes, really, our guitarist, who kept on saying, Peter, you should put the words for No Man's Land to the wool advert. He called it the wool advert because the wool advert in the, I think the 70s had Pachelbel's Canon, the classical piece over it, you know. And I'd always thought, it's a good idea, but, you know, it never really come about, you know. But it was in 1990 when we started playing Boys Own and flying gigs that we started using drum loops. It was the first time we'd been able to afford a sampler. Because in those days, samplers were dead expensive, you know. And we'd seen Big Audio Dynamite. I went to see Big Audio Dynamite at the State with Simon Moran, actually, because he was our tour manager at the time, you know, and generally helping us out, you know, from SJM. And we went to see Big Audio at the State, and I said to him, that's the future of music, you know, using dance loops and hip hop and samples from films. And it was just like, it was just a total, you know, you thought you'd landed on a different planet, you know, with listening to Big Audio. They were absolutely brilliant. But it took us 3 years to afford to get a sampler, you know. So when we got a sampler, and Kevin Sampson, who started to help us out in early 1990, went to Terry Farley with a tape we'd done of Stepping Stone, and he was DJing at the Limelight Club on Shaftesbury Avenue, you know, and Kevin basically doorstepped him and said, listen to this tape. And Terry got back to him and went, yeah, it's a good idea, but it's too fast, you know. So we were still doing fairly fast, you know. He said, slow it down and, you know, use a drum loop. Anyway, so we got working with Terry. So Terry introduced us to the mysterious world of drum loops, you know. And it's exactly what Big Audio had been using, and the Happy Mondays had been using it, and Primal Scream was starting to use it as well. But it was all experimentation. It was years, you know, really, for groups. Because you had Andy Weatherall, you had Terry Farley remixing things and changing songs like My Bloody Valentine soon into some magnificent nightclub anthem, you know. So it was all. So we had this idea for Pachelbel's Canon, but it wasn't really till the summer. We went to Ibiza in 1990 for Ibiza 90. It was run by Boys Own and Charlie Chester, who was from Flying Records, and you know he ran a club night in London. So it was an amalgamation, you know. And I came up with the lyric idea from then, you know.
I thought you had the lyric before. Was it a development on from No Man's Land?
Yeah, it was just development, and it was because there were so many different classes and different nationalities mixing in Ibiza. I just had this idea all together now, but it started off a bit like Paul McCartney yesterday when he was singing Egg and Chips. I started singing the lyrics of the chorus to different, you know, I didn't have All Together Now then. So Tony Wilson had just been on doing something with the NME. So I started singing, Tony Wilson again, Tony Wilson again, Tony Wilson again, Tony Wilson, something like that. It was just like, I just started singing it, but that became the lyric All Together Now, you know.
So that was all, you'd already had the Pachelbel idea.
Yeah, we started playing it live without lyrics, just as an encore. Or I don't think we did it in the Hacienda, the gig that you went to in April 1990, when we had the power cut into the third song or something, and we went, it's Tony Wilson's done it. He's pulled the plug on us. You know, and it was, you know, we got on great with Tony. He was what a character he was, you know. And still miss him to this day, you know. But when the Hacienda that night was full of Manchester's finest, you know, and the coachload came from Liverpool, would have been unthinkable, you know, even a year or two before, you know. But everyone was getting on like a house on fire, you know.
Yeah.
And we had the. Sorry?
Was there a reason for that? Was there something enhancing the mood?
I think there was something. Yeah, I think it was something. I think it was something artificial, which people refuse to. People don't like putting artificial stuff into their bodies, do they? But at the time, anyone was willing to put anything into their mouth, you know. I mean, so yeah, it was obviously induced by MDMA. I think it was a German invention, wasn't it? Most of the great inventions are from Germany.
Yeah, yeah.
That was an appetite suppressant, wasn't it? I think
Yeah,
for their troops or something. Yeah, yeah.
Variation of speed, isn't it? It's a slightly different version. Yeah.
So yeah, so people could stay up all night. Everyone was in the hacienda. The coach rode from Liverpool. Not a hint of trouble. Not an iota. So it was a culmination of that. When I was in Ibiza, I met Harvey from Tonka at the time, but Harvey the DJ, and he took us to a mountain, and we were thinking, what? He had the miner's helmet on, and he said, "Follow me, I'll take you to the light." So it was like a biblical experience, We went to this mountain where there was no electricity. It was a hippie commune, basically. That's what it was, And after Ibiza 90, I just thought, well, the lyrics for No Man's Land will work with Pachelbel's Canon. Steve's right. If we just get a chorus. And when we were rehearsing one day, I think I just started singing all together now, it was first of all Tony Wilson again, which I've never really said in interviews, but I trust you not to sensationalise it because, it was basically, he'd said something in the NME like, the Mondays album would be the Sergeant Pepper of its, and in many ways, I think he was onto something, but so was I singing, and I never told him we based the lyrics on Tony Wilson again, Tony Wilson. But I just sang anything that come into my head. I thought I've got to get a lyric to that, and I think altogether now, No Man's Land fitted it perfectly. We went into the studio with Suggs and Terry Farley. And Terry he'd got us, using various loops. The loop on Groovy Train was from Third Base, which was the New York hip hop, and they were all done by. We seemed to pick ones that were done by a fellow called Sam Severs, who ended up in a group called Downtown Science. We were a New York hip hop band, And when we were touring with Big Audio in '91, Downtown Science were on with us, and then we were on then Big Audio, and we were doing a sound check. And Sam, he was a great character, Sam, and I think he's still with us, but he came over and went, "Hey man, I recognise some of them loops." I mean, oh no. We didn't know how many we'd used of his, but we'd used Third Base definitely, and he was involved in that, And then I recognised 4 or 5 and said, "Okay, Sam, how much do we owe you?" I mean, "No man, I'm flattered. I got them off someone, they were all regurgitated from somewhere, So we were experimenting with loops, and I think it was a Booyah Tribe remix that I got for All Together Now. We tried to recreate it because we didn't want to just take it, and we tried to recreate it, but we couldn't, And we were in a studio in London, and we had to send back to someone had to call at my house to get the actual, because we'd sampled it originally for doing the live stuff. But Ben Leach, who sampled it, was slightly out of time, and in those days you couldn't fix it. Nowadays you just press a button and it's fixed.
Phone.
Yeah, you probably do it on your phone. But so yeah, we didn't know what it was going to be because Groovy Train was a big hit for us. Stepping Stone would have been, but we just couldn't keep up with demand. We had this mad idea that we should only release Stepping Stone on 12-inch vinyl, and that's it. It was a purist, we're going to promote vinyl, And then Suggs, believe it or not, this was before Madness Reform, Suggs, Terry Farley and Kevin Sampson were going around record shops when it was out in London with carfuls of the record, trying to keep up with demand. And then we had a midweek, top 40 midweek, but we couldn't keep up with demand. We didn't have a 7-inch, we didn't have a CD, and we didn't have a tape of it. So it was just 12-inch sales, and we thought we were being all purist in that, but not realising that really we were shooting ourselves in the foot by not putting it out on different formats. We were thinking it's only 12-inch vinyl that the real hipsters want.
So with All Together Now, did you learn how to make a hit single? Did you know it's going to be a massive hit?
Didn't know. No, we had no idea really. I think. You see, Produce wasn't really a record label. It was a punk rock idea. What had happened is there's this lad who'd been our t-shirt seller. He said, I know a fella who wants to put money into the group, or I know a fella who said, why aren't the farms successful? Just seeing the Mondays and various people on top of the pops and the roses. And I just said to him, economics, we can't afford to do anything. We get 1 or 2 John Peel sessions a year, which keeps us going in rehearsals. We can't afford to buy a sampler. We can't afford to go into a good studio. We can't afford a press agent. We can't afford a PR man for the radio, a plugger. We can't afford any of these things. Well, he's willing to lend you some money, And it ended up, it was all based on, in the 1990 interviews, everyone thought it was some sort of baron, drug baron from Liverpool. But it was actually the grandson of the Littlewood's Empire. And he said, I had a meeting with him early in 1990, I think with Keith Mullen. And he said, what will it cost to release a few? I said, well, 3 independent singles and maybe an indie album, maybe about £25,000, because we've been basing it on what we nearly signed a deal with Polydor during Housemartin's tour period with John Williams from Polydor, and he was going to give us an advance for £25,000, and that was going to be for a year. So we thought that would be the right type of fee, Even though it was a couple of years later, we thought that was the ballpark, not realising that we would have spent that within a few weeks. Because that's the way it happens, But what had happened with the Housemartins deal is Stan Collymore, who went off to be a children's writer in the Hebrides or something. So that deal fell through. It was going to be on Housemartin's own label, a subsidiary of Polydor, and they were going to call it the Fair Play Committee. And Paul Heaton's idea was that was after the committee that was set up to get black music on radio stations in America, that pop stations wouldn't play black music. That's why you had all these. And it was a great idea. And when Stan went off, that meant the end of the Housemartin. So it meant the end of the project. So we convinced Barney and a few other people who had no experience whatsoever. He said, well, if you won't give us the money, what happened was Kevin Sampson and Suggs came up for a meeting. Kevin was based in London at the time. He was the youth commissioner editor's assistant for Channel 4. So he did a blueprint for the farm in February 1990, and presented it to the meeting of Barney and a few Barney's mates who were like basically his mates, had no real experience in the music industry. And they sat down and talked about it. And Kevin produced this document, and it's a blueprint, and it's Malcolm McLaren-esque. It was brilliant. Everything he had, plugger, he had all the names of who he wanted to work. And he said, what you've got to do, Barry, is you send Ruthless Management, that's what he called him and Suggs, Ruthless Management. We were going to set up a company called Ruthless Management. You deposit £25,000 in Ruthless Management's bank account, and we'll deal with everything. And they were all a bit, they didn't really trust that idea, So we convinced them, okay, Kevin and Suggs will be the management side of it, but you set up a record company then? Oh yeah, okay, that's a better idea. But they had no experience. They didn't know what publishing was. They didn't know what recording royalties were. They didn't have a clue. So within when we first said to them, just released a 12-inch vinyl, Stepping Stone, they took that as, okay, yeah. They didn't. But by the time Groovy Team, they'd learned the lesson. Yeah, and so they did it on all formats. It just so happened that a short film about chilling had been filmed in Ibiza, and Barney had lent the money to Kevin's film company to do that, and that cost, tens of thousands to do. But that was out the day or the week Groovy Train was released. So all of a sudden, he had an advert for the farm on Channel 4. Kevin hadn't told Channel 4 that he was our manager. It's brilliant. It's an absolute classic, and it's never been really covered because it's been one of them. I've mentioned it a few times, but so Kevin had this blueprint, and he was the one. He got Anglo Plugging, who ended up being the biggest pluggers in the country. They'd had a bit of success with Beats International, but nothing else. He identified them. He got Pat Harkins from Best Impressed, I think she was working for, and he poached there, you know. So he put the jigsaw together, you know.
What was Suggs' role in it?
Suggs was showing us, right? I mean, he produced the album, but he was also involved in drinking sessions in London, which where all the ideas came from. So Suggs' mum was a brilliant character. And she ran a bar just off Oxford Street called the Troy Bar. And we spent a lot of time in there. We ended up recording in Maida Vale studios in Primrose Hill. But it was before Primrose Hill had become, you know, a really fashionable place. It was still very rich, but there wasn't all that cafe society and all that. It was a bit run down, actually. So we go to Soho quite a lot with Suggs, and he'd show us all these speakeasies that his mum had introduced him to, because his mum had been a jazz singer in London, and he was part of his one-man show was trying to find his dad, who was also a jazz musician, I think, and he ends up, part of the show is trying to find him, locate him, track him down, and finds out he was dead, you know. But so Suggs was he was like a spiritual. He was our mentor, really. Everything Suggs told us to do, don't employ your mates, because they made the same mistake with Liquidated the Studio. Don't employ your mates. Don't do this. Don't, you know, make sure you've got everything he advised us to do. We went, yeah, we'll agree to that. But then we ended up doing it, you know, because when all the money starts flooding in from sales, you feel a bit guilty almost that, you know, it's happened. I mean, you know, it was a strange feeling, you know. We started saying, oh, we'll employ him, you know, and I think it all got a bit too much for us, really, you know. It was an avalanche. So from having a meeting in January, February 1990, by Christmas we were challenging for the number one. You know, with Madonna and Cliff Richard, and doing Top of the Pops with Cliff. It was just bizarre. It was like an unbelievable story. Jamie Reed, who did the Sex Pistols covers, came in to produce. Carl Hooton knew him, you know, and he came in to produce records to see what was going on. He went, "This is the most punk rock thing I've ever seen." He said, "I can't believe it." None of them had any experience. It was all done by chance, but it was genuine demand out there, you see. And Suggs in the studio was brilliant. He took the idea for No Man's Land, and he said, "You've got 6 verses, because the original No Man's Land had 6 verses." He said, "You've got to cut them." He said, "And still keep the meaning." And I was a bit, oh, no. But because it was Suggs, I went, all right. Because it was my lyrics, so I didn't want it. Because the other lyrics were talking about Kitchener having to go to the Houses of Parliament and address MPs had to say, what's happening on the Western Front? Because in some places on the Western Front, they didn't get them fighting again until January. You know, the truce lasted that long, you know, and so it was a story about that, really.
How did we get them fighting again?
How did they? Stories of atrocities and propaganda, and they fired on us first down the line, you know, and all that. So that's how they got them fighting again. But there was a great documentary on recently, Brazilian Share podcast by Doughton Adebayo and Tim Vickery. Doughton does the 5 Live at night. And I think because I'd done an interview with them recently, they started to look at the Christmas tree. So they got this historian on talking about it, who's an expert on it. And the first question, did it happen? And I went, yeah, of course it happened. He said it happened. And there were several football matches. It wasn't just one. The fraternisation didn't happen everywhere on the, I think it was an 800-mile front line from Belgium to Switzerland. He said it didn't happen everywhere, but they estimate at least 100,000 troops were involved in the fraternisation. You know? And I've got books like this, Meeting the Enemy. That's a fantastic book, and it give first-hand accounts. And the reason we know it happened is because you've got primary sources of information. For historians, is the most important thing. And that's people writing letters home to say it happened and exactly what happened. So the fraternisation happened en masse in many respects, but there were several kickabouts. They weren't proper football matches as such, but they were kickabouts. And
did the Germans win them all?
Well, there's one there which said that the Scottish regiments Scottish regiment, Highland regiment played Saxon regiments, and that's what it says in the books you read about it. It was dependent on what regiments. If they were Prussian regiments, they were a lot more hostile. If they were Saxon regiments, they felt a lot more allegiance to it. I mean, basically being allies, hadn't they, in the 19th century? So this was all the First World War was concocted. No one really knows why it happened.
It was a family argument.
Sorry?
It was a family argument.
Well, yeah, I think the Kaiser wanted a navy, didn't he? And the British thought that would challenge the empire. It's all about imperialism. So when Michael Gove said, we've got to rescue the First World War from left-wing liberals who've made a share in the Blackadder generation. And then a historian from Oxford University wrote in and said, Michael, this is nothing about freedom. This was our allies were Tsarist Russia. And most of the people fighting didn't have the vote. Because you had to be a homeowner to have the vote at the time. So a lot of the Powell's brigades and that wouldn't have had automatically. It was 21-year-olds and being a homeowner, I think, and women obviously never had the vote. So, and the historian said he just completely destroyed Michael Gove's argument by saying that the one thing it wasn't about was freedom. You can talk about market share and being afraid of the empire being compromised by a German navy, but don't be going on about freedom.
It's a really brilliant album. I'll send you a link to it. But you remember Einstürzende Neubauten, the German band?
Yeah.
They did an album about the First World War. They got access to all the old records, but they got a lot of the German records. So it's actually looking at it from the other way around.
Yeah.
And it's got all the telegrams the Kaiser was sending, and and they're like, I'll see you at hunting in 2 months' time once we get this war out of the way. So.
Yeah. There was, there's a brilliant book by Christopher Clark called Sleepwalkers, and if you read it, it's no one wanted the war. No one really wanted the war, but nobody really petitioned against it. There's another brilliant book by Adam Hochschild called To End All Wars, and that talks about the big peace movements in Berlin and the UK. Massive marches against the war, But of course, that all evaporates as soon as the war is declared, and no one can really tell. There's no real reason. They literally sleepwalked in and thought it was going to be. They thought it was going to be a 19th century, like a Boer War, flamboyant and cavalry charges, and that's what all the higher echelons of the British Army thought. But they were dealing with they should have learned, because when they were in the Sudan, the Germans had witnessed what British machine guns had done to the Sudanese at the Battle of Omdurman, I think it was called. And they wiped out 10,000 Sudanese for the loss of 30 or 40 men in a morning. So they knew both sides knew the capabilities of 20th century weaponry. So to actually, not campaign against the war, I just think it was. I still can't work out, and there's no real reason, and no one can put a finger on the reason why it was. People say, "Oh yeah, German expansionism," but Britain controlled a third of the world. How much,
the empire was decaying. That was the other problem, wasn't it? And
I think the Germans were getting good at making things as well. They were a threat to the industrial heart of British society. It was based on the Industrial Revolution, and I think the British hierarchy thought they were a threat, definitely. And I think, you could say. I mean, there was one. Have you ever seen Reds? The film Reds, where the journalist, the American journalist, was it Jamie Reed? Was it? I think the film was about him going to report on the Russian Revolution, and he goes to a liberal club in America, in New York, and 1916, and he's got a report on, and someone asked him a question and said, what's the First World War all about? And he went, prophets.
Yeah.
And that's all he said.
Mm.
I think he's the only person buried in the Kremlin, I think. The only American buried in the Kremlin.
Mm.
But that was Warren Beatty's masterpiece. It's a brilliant film, but years trying to make it, but never really caught on with the British public. I don't think, or the American public, because it was a bit too near the knuckle, because it was like asking questions.
But interestingly, you actually managed to turn all this into a pop song, into a hit, in the middle of a year when everyone's peace and love and ecstasy, and it's actually a political song, but it captures the spirit at the time, the idealism. Like you say, in Ibiza, people from all over Europe dancing together all night in the streets, in the hotels, on the roofs, and all these different factors all feeding to one song at the same time. So you conscious of that? Was it just something? It was just an unconscious tying up of all the loose ends.
I think it was. I mean, I thought it would be great for the dance scene, because it was all together now on the dance. But I wanted to have the political aspect of it, because not many journalists wanted to talk about politics in those days, because it was all about how many years you take in and that. But we were always trying to take. I mean, we took people to Robert. We took Andrew Collins, I think, to Robert Tressel's grave. In the shadow of Walton Prison. We wrote The Ragged Child of Philanthropy. So we were always trying to introduce that type of thing, but it fell upon deaf ears a lot of the time, and I think, a lot of people mocked it, really, thinking, why are they talking about this, but Andrew Collins, now on reflection, says it was one of the greatest days of his life, as a journalist, us taking him around various spots. We even took smash hits to it. And all the magazines, which you wouldn't expect, and took them to various places. But maybe that was my background as someone who was obsessed with history. And I don't know. I think as a song, it captured a moment in time. Well, I was trying to do justice to what had happened in the First World War, because Keir Hardie, who went on loads of, founder of the Labour Party, went on loads of meetings and demonstrations against the war. He thought the Christmas truce was the beginning of the working class revolting against the hierarchy, and the upper classes and the people who controlled the army and the mechanisms of the army, But he was mistaken, because I think it's easy to get people fighting again. It's a lot harder to keep them shaking hands, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I
think if you look at it, I mean, the making of the record was, we didn't know it was going to be have such a time span. But Andy MacDonald, Suggs, as I say, they hadn't reformed Madness, but Chaz Smash was the only person who was allowed into the studio. And believe it or not, Chaz Smash, the dancer with Madness, was an A&R person for Godis. Andy MacDonald, was it?
Yeah.
Head of Godis, yeah. And he came in to hear it, and he went, "That is unbelievable. That's a Christmas number one." And so he said, "Can Andy MacDonald come in and listen to it?" And we went, "Yeah, because it's jazz and Suggs." And Suggs had been in the studio all the time. Terry Farley suggested drum loops and various things, but he wanted to do his own versions of the songs, which were more dancey, which he did, which was a free vinyl 12-inch that we did. But Andy MacDonald come into the studio when he heard it. He went, "That's a Christmas number one." This was about September, October. He said, "But not if you stay with Produce." They're an independent, purely independent. Didn't have any. We were distributed by Pinnacle. A lot of the independents were distributed by a major, so they had more clout. He said, "But if you stay with Produce, it won't be a number one." And he said, "Now I'll give you X amount of money." And it was a lot of money. It was, lottery winning figures, And if you come with me to go to this, and we went, "Nah, you're all right, Andy." Because we thought, if we do that now, we're hypocrites, aren't we? We were trying to get them to start a record company. we're in this position now. Look, nailed on. Spartacus was going to be number one anyway, which was out in March. So we thought we could, it was just impossible to do, and we wouldn't be able to live with ourselves, I don't think, but, and we didn't have the clout of the majors. But Pinnacle was, it was really loyalty, it was really loyalty that kept us from doing it, because we could have easily taken the money and said thank, because Produce didn't want to start a label. The people involved, the one mistake we did have is that we didn't become board members. We based Produce on factory records, not realising the factory records was a basket case of hemorrhaging money. So it was a 50-50 profit share. There was no contracts as such at that time. It was, and it was all based upon whatever happens, And we thought the situationism of what Tony Wilson had been involved in, this is the way forward. This is how we take on, and it really did. I've put this on Twitter a couple of times, and people mock, but it changed the face of music, because the deals we ended up doing with Sony in 1992, a couple of years later, with the blueprint for the majors taking over small independents. It was the blueprint for creation. And Alan McGee will tell you that. Because we had so much market share in that period that the majors going, get me a farm, that's what they're saying, get me a farm, get me do this. Who are they? Bill Drummond was constantly ringing up Produce Records going, who's behind this? Come on, who is it? Who's behind it? And as they were taking another toke, and someone would ring up and go, can we speak to the A&R? And they go, someone wants the A&R department, and they just laugh at it. It was like, unfortunately, by this time, in the 1901, we were in America. We started to employ a lot of people, and 20-odd people, whatever. All the things Sugg said don't do. because of working class guilds, I don't know, but it seemed the right thing to do, And we were off touring, but Produce at the time then were signing up artists that we'd never heard of and we hadn't agreed to, and it all went a bit, pear-shaped, but at the time, between, I'd say, for an 18-month period, we couldn't, everything we did and everything Kevin did, seemed to be the right thing. It was only when the group started having an opinion. We had ideas, which were like the sheep idea on the front cover of Stepping Stone, and the ideas for songs like Groovy Train and All Together Now, and obviously there are songs, but then Kevin, after All Together Now, said, we've got to re-release Stepping Stone on all formats, it'll be a massive hit. Kevin, we can't do that, we'll upset the dance crowd, We were still trying to be purists, but it was wrong. Kevin was right. I don't know if I've ever told him this, but he was right. But it's because the group were having opinions on, and it's like when any group becomes successful, you start thinking, it's because of my ideas going in. And I think it was a collective, and it worked on a vote. And we voted Kevin down, And we should have re-released Stepping Stone, because it would have been a massive hit. Spartacus being number one, but we released Don't Let Me Down, and did a very tongue-in-cheek video, but almost, because we loved the Madness videos, we'd loved the Monkees, we'd loved the way the Beatles messed around, So we were basing it on that idea, really. But it started to get a bit too tongue-in-cheek, and journalists then, because Don't Let Me Down was a massive hit, they saw the chink in the armour that they could go for, But it was an unbelievable period, and I think without any of those ingredients, without Suggs, without Kevin, without Terry Farley, without Anglo Plugin, without Pat Harkins from Press, without Produce, without the money of Produce brought to it, and without some of the ideas, it was a jigsaw. But take one of those things away, and it mightn't have happened. It was all important. It was a collective. We thought we were doing the right thing, and what a laugh we had as well. We had so much of a laugh that I think a lot of the journalists didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to take us and that. I think you know, Kevin said to me about 91, end of 91, you've got to start being more serious in interviews, because we were just taking the piss, you know. And we did an interview with Marky Smith, Select, I think it was for Select in 91. And I had a day on the air with Marky Smith, and he went, "They'll come for you, Pete. They'll come for you. They won't like it. They won't like it, you know." And he was, that's a terrible impression, but you know what I mean. But he was warning me, saying, I read your interviews, you know, very thought-provoking and that, but they won't like it. You know, they want to go back to the, you know, because it was an experimental period. I always remember Daniel Miller from Mute saying, you know, people were experimenting with different sounds, and Big Audio were doing this, and various people were trying to come up, Chemical Brothers were doing stuff, but the record industry didn't understand it. They wanted it to go back to guitar bands. That's what they wanted, you know. And so grunge was a massive change in attitudes, fashions, and the music press, you know. And I think, I mean, we loved Nirvana. We had Smells Like Teen Spirit in America when we were touring in 91. And we're going, listen to this. It's unbelievable, brilliant, you know. And we didn't see any dichotomy between what them doing grunge and groups experimenting with guitars and hip hop loops and dance loops. And we didn't see any. But a lot of the music press saw it as us and them, and you're well aware of that yourself.
Well, they have to create scenes. Well, they did. Yeah. To sell paper, didn't they? So the song itself took on a life of its own. It's sort of, nowadays, it's almost become detached from the band, doesn't it? You sort of hear the
a lot of people will know the song before they know the band, you know. I think that's inevitable, you know. And it has taken a life on it, you know. You know, if you'd said, you know, say 30 years, you think, fucking hell, where's that gone? You know, it's like, you know, it seems like, you know, yesterday. But obviously, when you're looking at a song like that, it wasn't intended to be that, but it's just by pure chance, really. It's become that, you know. It's been adopted by so many different things, you know, so many different organisations. And the latest one, which I'm proud of, is in South America, which they've used it as their COVID response in Argentina and Chile and Brazil and most places in Argentina. It's been an advert on the television with nurses helping each other, you know, and also, so it means things to different people. I've heard people say that for squaddies, it's their regimental theme tune. You know, don't you realise it's a peace song? But for some people, it means different things, you know. And I think, in a way, you know, that's fine by me. You know, people can listen to it how they want to listen to it. But basically, I wanted it to be an anti-war song, and I wanted it, and it was inspired by Michael Foot wearing that so-called donkey jacket. I was so angry when you know, seeing the right wing attacks on him for doing that. Going, the people who fought in the First World War would have been clapping him. It wouldn't be. And it wasn't until later years that it turned out that it was a right-wing MP, Labour MP, tipped off the Daily Mail, you know. So it's still happening now, you know. I can't remember the name, but they tipped the Daily Mail off, and he's wore a donkey jacket. But in Michael Foot was on record in his autobiography saying that the Queen Mother had congratulated him on the day because it was from Harrods or somewhere, and it cost an enormous amount of money, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It shows you how the truth and reality can become very at odds with very blurred. Yeah. The last football team to use it were Barrow, believe it or not. They changed the words to a Barrow. I think Barrow used it. Lots of different. I mean, it was. In fact, the FA told me they were going to use it for Euro '96 as the theme tune. They weren't going to ask a group to write a song. They were going to use it all together now. As the theme tune.
That's the only place it hasn't gone, isn't it? The obvious place.
Where? Sorry.
Is it the obvious place would be for the England football song, wouldn't it?
Well, it was. They used it in 2004 for Portugal, but Germany used it in 2006 for the whole tournament, but they got Atomic Kitten to re-record it or something. We had not much to do with it. We just have to say yes or no, But it's only if they change the lyrics that they need some sort of okay. But because Everton had used it in '95, because that was Keith Mullen's fault, or not his fault, but we'd done the last day of the Cop, and we'd done the Inrush testimonial, and he was going, "It's payback time," and he had a young lad at the time, and he was going, they're going to meet the team, they're going to go down on the team bus. And it was nothing to do with that being recorded by session musicians in London. So confident were the record company that we were going to say yes, But initially I said no. And it wasn't because Everton. It was because they were changing the lyrics to some stuff about Harry Catchick and Bob Blatchford. I didn't want the lyrics changed, And then my dad, who's been a season ticket at Anfield since 1962, and would still go to the match now, even though he's in his 90s. If he was successful in the ballots, he'd still go. But he said, well, if you don't let them use it, you're being hypocritical, because what's the song about? Two enemies meeting in no man's land and shaking hands. No, no, bastard, yeah, he's right, So it's been out. It's not one of the proudest moments, but I think people realise that what the song was about and but it's been used by so many different. See, Marine were the first. In fact, the first time anyone sang it were Liverpool fans in an away match in Christmas 1990, and we've got it on video. And they all come out of Lime Street doing a conga, singing "Brucey's dropped it again, Brucey's dropped it again, Brucey's dropped it again in no man's land." Brucey, I think they were playing Crystal Palace or QPR or something, and he dropped the clanger. And so they started singing for them. Then Marine used it in the FA Cup trophy run, about 92, I think it was. So it's being used by probably about 30. In fact, someone said to me, Flamengo, Ultras, when he was a seaman, he pulled me aside in a pub in Liverpool before the lockdown, and he said, "Do you know Flamengo, Ultras? That's their song." I said, "No, I had no idea." He said, "Yeah, he was a seaman, he went into a bar near the port, which is a Flamengo supporters club, Ultras bar, and it was on the jukebox all the time. You're all singing along to it. So it's meant different things to different people. So I'm proud of the song, but I think "Love See No Colour" is a better song, for me.
But it's a universal theme.
Yeah.
Even more universal, so that's why it can fit everywhere, isn't it? Which is classic, really.
Yeah. I think James Brown said to me just before I went on stage at Ellen Road with Happy Mondays and various groups, and he went, it might have even been you. He said, "That will last. That'll last forever." I think it might have been you, or it was you or James Brown.
It was me.
Were you at Ellen Road?
I was there, but it was. I actually told you that when I interviewed you in Liverpool about the same time.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Well, we talked.
It's your fault.
My fault. Yeah.
But I'm obviously proud of the song and that. But I think I think what I wanted to do was to promote what had happened in that First World War. That was my main intention. Because everyone promotes war, don't they, or commemorates war, what had happened, and but no one, apart from the odd book, commemorates this. And I think that an act of humanity in such a barbaric, futile war has got to be promoted.